Certainly, every financial organization aspires to be resilient and secure. But the question is, how do we do it? To answer that is an industry strategist with more than 20 years of experience in the security field. Our speaker is a trusted security advisor who helps identify the most pressing challenges for online businesses. He is also an independent consultant for federal state authorities, such as the German Ministry of IT Defense. He holds CISSP and CCSP certifications and is a certified ethical hacker. Here's Akamai Industry Strategist, Mr. Gerhard Giese.
Welcome to the edge of the internet, a world that's fast, vast, and volatile. To succeed, you must be ready for anything. Akamai helps you navigate the edge so you can compete and win. Be unstoppable on the world's most powerful edge platform.
Hello and welcome to this ISOG presentation on how to run a resilient, vigilant and secure fintech operation. My name is Gerhard Giese. I work at Akamai as an industry strategist for the financial services industry. I've been working for the company for 12 years and I have a history of over 25 years in the security area. In the past 2 years, we have seen plenty of changes all over the world. With a pandemic raging, a lot of the things that we were used to were no longer working. A lot of the things that we did day by day, now we had to do differently. Now this doing things differently obviously also caused a lot of change and digital innovation, making it possible for us to do these things online. This was true both for retail, but also definitely for the financial services industry, giving us the ability to do online shopping and paying online at the same time. But what do these changes mean for a country like the Philippines, where over 50 million Filipinos still don't have a bank account? Actually, according to the central bank survey, the number of unbanked Filipinos adults is estimated at 51.2 million out of a total population of 72 million in 2019. This makes it more than 70% of the adult population. Therefore, pawn shops and money service businesses remain the top remittance channels, followed by banking and physical delivery and ATMs right afterwards. But while we know that countries like the Philippines still rely on cash, we can also see that cash withdrawal worldwide is declining, and it is declining fast. In 2020, during the pandemic, it was the lowest that we've ever seen since 2002, therefore making it a clear trend that is ongoing. So here we see different trends sort of clashing with each other. On the one hand, the Philippines really rely on cash a lot, but you see that, that the amount of cash withdrawals is declining all over the world. On the other hand, the Philippines has a much higher rate of internet users, bringing it actually to rank 4 in Asia, with it only being on number 7 counted on population average. This actually makes it supersede both China and India. But most internet users, 89% of them, are accessing the internet through mobile data. Right now, of those, only 9% really use the internet for financial transactions. That makes it as low as 1% of the overall population. So this is where it is time for the fintech companies to shine. They should enable everyone to participate on online payments globally. But how do you do that? How do you make it possible as a fintech company to gain the trust of so many people that have never done online banking before? Well, first thing that you really have to do is you have to earn their trust. You really have to make sure they understand you use their data wisely and you are easy to be used. So they can trust themselves to do their online banking without making bad mistakes, and they can trust you to use the information they get right and make sure they don't get attacked by any bad actors everywhere in the world. So I would like to highlight this trust in 3 different ways during this presentation. The first one, I like to talk about availability, the necessity for your site, your app, your experience to be online as much as possible all the time. Then I would like to talk about the user experience, the usability, the user journey that your customers have to take and how you can make sure that they understand they're doing the right things. Last but not least, and for the longest time today, I like to spend on the security realm, making sure to highlight what is necessary for fintech and fin companies in general to stay ahead and not be taken out by threat actors. For banking and fintech, availability is priority. If you're not online, you're not making any money. If you're going offline without any information to your customers, you lose trust. It's absolutely clear that especially when you're going offline because you've been taken down by some attackers, the trust that customers have to you with their money will degrade. And this is what we've also seen worldwide. When banks fail, when bank websites and applications go down for a certain amount of time or for a long period of time, customers are losing this trust to these systems. So it is vital for you as a fintech company to make sure that you can stay online. But when I say online, I mean not only available in general, I also mean that the way you are available is fast and not only reliable. And let me explain to you why I think this is important. First reason, you will always also have experienced yourself. If you have to work with a slow environment on your computer, on your mobile, in the app that you're using, you get stressed. Actually, according to a study done by Ericsson Consumer Labs, a slow response can be as stressful as watching a really scary movie, increasing your heart rate by 44%. And you don't want that. You want to be the company that is thought to be fast, reliable, secure, all at the same time. So you really want to make sure that the availability, the response rate is fast. But not only to decrease the heart rate of your customers. Even more so, being slow or not being fast enough can actually lose you money. We've seen that just 1 second delay can reduce the likelihood of somebody placing any kind of trade on a trading mobile platform or a trading app by 50%. The drop-off rate goes faster and faster the longer the wait time. Now obviously trading is very special because it needs to be real time, but the same goes for banking. If your system doesn't respond the way you used to it, then what's going to happen is a lot of your customers will think maybe they did something wrong, or they will start to question the system. Is it still working? Is there something broken? Have I pressed this button? So they might press a button twice and they might get irate, and you don't want that. But good performance also helps you in times of crisis. We have seen this especially during the time of lockdown. This, what you see here, is actually some impulse data from a European bank. And you can see on the left-hand side the time before the lockdown, and right next to the red bar the time after the lockdown. Now the green bars show the amount of page views that this bank experienced before and after the lockdown. The blue line that you see above is the actual speed, the performance the application has shown during this time. What you can see is that right after the lockdown, the bank had 4 times more page requests or application requests than they had before. Obviously, a lot of people were now trying to do all their payments online, all their transactions, and were no longer going to the actual bank itself. What you can also see is while they were able to do this, and the performance was actually staying the same. In fact, the load time of the site itself, of the application itself, actually was reduced, making it faster because there was more availability, for example, for someone like Akamai to cache pages, actually speeding up the process. Slow can be as slow that you can actually say the site is no longer available. Now this is definitely what you don't want. If the page responds as slowly that there is no way that the customers will actually wait for you, then you come to the trouble that the drop-off rate skyrockets and you will no longer have customers actually using your application. So you definitely want to make sure your site is as fast as possible. You want to be clear that your web experience is as fast that your customers feel secure, they understand that everything that's happening is happening the right way. And they don't want to wait. Which is why it will help you to work with a company like Akamai. Using a content delivery network will speed up the processes, will make sure that your website speed increases. In fact, even Akamai needs to work on its own performance. And we've made sure that this performance has improved year over year. So even comparing between 2020 and 2021, we were able to accelerate our own performance by 9% on desktops and actually by 11% for all the customers using mobile services. So let's assume you've done everything you can to make your site fast and reliable. Now what? The next thing you really have to check for is the user journey. How easy is it for your customer to actually go all the steps that they need to go so that they can do what you expect them to do? Now this will always be a challenge because there's no such thing as the customer. Especially in a situation like in the Philippines, you're going to have a lot of different people coming from totally different angles and having different sets of knowledge around digital banking or how to do transactions. So now you have to really think of how can I best take everyone with me and make sure they understand that they're doing the right thing. And this means taking a closer look at the user base. Who do I have that wants to use my website? Who do I have that wants to use my application? There's going to be a different for people that have always used applications and are really, really mature utilizing the internet compared to people who might have never ever done online banking before. So you have to ask yourself, how accessible, how easy to use is my app really? Have I made sure that the whole story from start to end is easy to follow? Are there any obstacles? Are there sudden changes in the movement that are not easy to follow? Is there a clear path? So for this, you need to stand outside the box. You need to make sure that you understand how your customer sees your page. And you have to vary from all these different types of customers to make sure every single one has the possibility to utilize your application best possible. So let's move to the last part, security. Now this is a challenge for everyone, especially for the security specialist. Because what you really want to do is you want to set up walls all around your system as high as possible to make sure no attack can go through. But this actually can be counterproductive. What can happen is that you set your security standards so high and obtrusive that your customers actually have problems following their user journey. So you really have to make this right balancing step to see that you have the appropriate security that makes sure your application and your API is secure against external threats, but at the same time, the user journey of your customer needs to be as easy as possible. And this is a tough one, because there's a lot of threats out there, especially when we're going in the web application and mobile app theme. We can see that utilizing APIs is a challenge because it can open up a lot of security threats. According to Salt Security, in the past year, 91% of all the respondents that they have questions experienced an API security incident. These incidents reached from vulnerabilities that were found out over breaches to authentication problems, denial of service attacks, and account misuse and bot scraping. All of these are problematic by themselves, but combined, this is a real issue. So let's go a little bit into detail and look at the different challenges and how to be sure you can actually withstand them. The first challenge that I would like to highlight is complexity. Nowadays, both our websites and our mobile apps and apps in general get more and more complicated and consist of more and more different parts, some of them even coming from third party. In fact, looking at the World Wide Web, we can see that 60% of all desktop and almost 70% of all mobile content that's being served at the moment comes from third parties. Now this bears a risk because you only have limited access to what's being served over these third-party systems. This can be an open threat for the data that your customers enter, making it possible to create a man-in-the-browser attack. Now, man-in-the-browser attacks are difficult to find out, mostly because they happen in the browser, not in your system. And this is normally where your security realm is already ended. So you really want to have visibility to what's happening in the browser itself. You want to understand how do all the different JavaScripts actually behave? What kind of information are they sharing? Who do they talk to? And maybe even be able to tell them what to do and what not to do. So this is definitely something you want to look out for. A second imminent threat that you should definitely care about is the threat of malicious login attempts, mostly done by bots. In the past year, from 20 to 21, in the first quarter, we've seen an increase of over 130% of malicious login attempts caused by these bots. Now these obviously are credential abuse attacks or credential stuffing. This credential stuffing is normally done to make sure that the attackers have a lot of different usernames and passwords that they know are working. Now you might say, yeah, but most of these fail. Well, that might be correct, but as you probably know, it only takes one attempt that works to actually be in the system. And therefore, to see that these kind of malicious login attempts are being done is absolutely vital, and maybe even make sure that these login attempts that are automated cannot work is even more important. Even in situations where you have multi-factor authentication, this can still be a risk. While you might be able to make sure that it doesn't cause an issue anymore, because after putting in the username and the password, you're now faced with actually a challenge that you need to face, a two-factor authentication or similar. There is a problem, however, because taken the way that you've set up your system, the attacker might now know that the user password, the credential, is actually working. So now they have a working credential set that can be used for an attack that might be slightly different, and we will come to that later. But sometimes the attack is even smarter. In these days of connectivity, APIs are intertwined and connected with each other, making it possible to link external accounts to your system so that you have just one place that you need to utilize to look at all the different accounts that you're used to. These attacks are more and more frequent nowadays. What happens in this situation is the following. An attacker creates an account with valid credentials that are not his own, that he's basically stolen from the internet. These credentials may be a name, an address, maybe a social security number, and other informations that we tend to call personal identifiable information. Once this account has been created, the attacker can now successfully log in and utilize this account to link to other external accounts. Now at this stage, quite often, this linkage is actually done in a less secure way than the initial account creation. So now the attacker can utilize these other account connections through this third party, making it much harder for any security realm to find out, and therefore much easier to misuse these external accounts. Now this is a kind of fraud that you really want to be mindful at, because it actually utilizes a system that should normally only be utilized by people through an external API, and this is then done automatically. But even if you are making sure that all of these problems are mitigated and there is a low risk on these APIs for you, there is still one risk that you still have to mitigate, and that is your customers. Just imagine your customers receiving an SMS similar to this one. How much is the probability, do you think, that they immediately find out that this is actually a fraudulent attempt to lure them into giving out their username and data to an attacker? Well, we can see out of the history of these phishing and spear phishing attacks that there is a high possibility that your customers will not find this out in time and actually follow the link and then might get affected by the attack. Take a look at this picture taken by the Manchester police. What you see here is basically the headquarters of one of the phishing attacks that we've seen lately. This was basically where all the SMS has been sent out to customers of banks. And this time it was over 25,000 in just one day. Now, the way the Manchester police actually got behind this was by triangulating all the SMSs sent out after being warned by the administration of one of the affected banks. So therefore, they had a good chance of really finding out from where all of these SMS were sent by. But what would happen if you didn't see this attack happening? What would happen if nobody alerted the police? Well, the chances are high that a lot of the customers would actually be lured and be convinced to give out their information. And let me explain to you how the attackers did it. Now, given the victim will follow the link sent out by the SMS, he will be lured into a website that looks almost the same as the website you would expect from the bank. It probably will be as close that a lot of these people will not recognize the difference. Now, this looks pretty much normal. What you see here is the possibility to enter a username, the possibility to then enter your password and press a continue button, something we're all used to. However, in this case, if the user, the victim, will press all of these buttons and enter the appropriate information, the attacker actually will be alerted. And now he already has the customer's credentials, which is bad enough. For the second factor, which often is required in banking surroundings and also in some e-commerce sites, he can now actually request back the information that he needs for the second authentication to the customer. He does this by entering the username and password himself in the real website and then returning a request to the customer again that asks for the specific second factor that is required in this stage. Now, customers that are very careful might be able to figure out that things take a little long or the latency is higher or something's different. But there's going to be a high volume of people that will not see this, and therefore this is an imminent threat for your customers to completely give out all the access to their system in just one go. And with these phishing attacks becoming more and more prominent, we also see class action lawsuits popping up everywhere. Main reason being the victims, the customers of these banks basically turn back to their companies saying, you haven't saved us, you didn't make sure we were being secure. And there is some reason behind this. There is some arguments that we can actually follow, because there are ways to make sure that these phishing and spear phishing attacks are harder to do, are not as easy to follow through. So there is a few things that you can do and you can make sure you are aware of, and let me go into detail what I think they are. Now, first thing that I want to stress out here is that everything I'm speaking about might or might not be possible for you to do on your own. What you probably want to do is you want to get a partner for yourself to make sure this kind of profiling and risk assessment is done not only within your company, but that you get help to do so. And so we're already in the middle of the overall problem. What we need to start doing is, first of all, make sure we get a proper profiling of our customers individually. So we want to make sure we know their day-to-day behavior. And this day-to-day behavior goes beyond just to check whether they are a robot or not, because that's not real profiling. That is just basically making sure you're not talking to a bot network. You want to continue this process by, for example, starting to create a user journey that's standard, a way of accessing that you see standard for the user. Then and only then will you have a proper way of finding deviations, finding situations where suddenly something's different. The user is behaving different, he's coming from a different network, he's using a different device, or the session somehow is set up in a different way. All of these things by themselves probably should not ring the alert bell. But if you get the magnitude of all of these things, if you get more and more risks add together, that's when you want to react. That's when you want to block out that customer account and make sure that everything is correct. To be able to get to this point, what you also have to do first is an appropriate risk assessment. You have to really find out what kind of profile do I need to check? What's the risk I'm actually going against? What are the appropriate measures to take? What are risk factors that I need to find out? And only after this risk assessment can you actually start doing a proper profiling. Once you're done with creating common risks and sort of a pre-built profile that you want to maintain, you can then also start to build the risk scoring, making sure that the different indicators are set in an appropriate way so you don't get too many false positives, by that way really annoying your customers because they might be shut out of their accounts. After you've done all of this, you will come to a point where your accounts are much more secure, even if a user comes to your page, uses the right username, password, and second factor authentication, but he's using different profiling types. But even if you secure yourself against all these threats, there's one threat that still stays imminent. And this is the possibility of just filling your pipe with random data to make sure you can no longer communicate with your customers. And this is what distributed denial of service attacks do. Now, they've been with us for a long period of time. I mean, you probably heard the name DDoS attacks at least for the past 10 years. But don't be fooled. That doesn't mean they're less dangerous. That doesn't really mean they have never changed. In fact, distributed denial of service attack is just the overarching name on a lot of different ways of making sure your site is no longer reachable. These can be reflection attacks, utilizing services in the internet in a way that they actually make sure they don't send their data to the requester, but to your page, rendering it unavailable. They can also be a direct attack, basically like just sending SYN packets or others, just making sure your systems have to do too much work and they cannot respond to anything else. What you can also see that a lot of these attacks are actually utilized as extortion attacks, trying to get money from you. These kind of attacks normally happening the same way every single time. You get a threat letter, an extortion letter, where you are being threatened to pay ransom money, mostly in terms of Monero or other kind of cryptocurrency. Then a first attack is being set on your systems, showing the force that the attacker can actually gain on your system. Now, without any external help, given the size of the attack, you might not be able to withstand this. So therefore, having the help of a scrubbing center service or of an external, a cloud security solution will definitely help you in these situations, making it possible that the attack is actually mitigated long before it reaches the actual bottleneck, the connection that you have to the internet. So if you are under attack, this is what you want to look out for. And why do I know this? Because in the recent attacks, we have seen that customers that were actually routing onto our scrubbing centers quite often immediately saw a decrease of attack or a complete stop. So you might ask yourself, why is that the case? So my personal take is the reason for this is because the attacker also has to pay for the attack traffic that he creates, making it basically a gamble. Do I actually invest more money? Can I overwhelm the system that's behind it? Well, if not, let's not invest the money. Let's move to an easier target. And that's exactly what's happening. If the attacker sees that you're behind a scrubbing center that can withstand the kind of attack that he's actually enforcing, he will probably move on to an easier target. So this is why these systems will definitely help you. So we've talked a lot about the different attack types that might come your way and the different ways how you could mitigate these attacks. One of the things that you have to bear in mind, however, is something that I said initially. Choose your weapons wisely. Make sure that your security doesn't disrupt your customers. These are two examples where a disruption might be really, really bad. I would personally say that probably no one in the world likes to solve captchas. Now, captchas might be a good solution against some kind of automated threats, but between you and me, a lot of these threats can nowadays actually solve captchas. And in addition, if you have never done online banking before, and while you're doing transactions, you're suddenly asked to find the aeroplanes or something like that, what do you think? How likely is it for the person doing that to understand what's actually been asked of him? This is disruptive security. What you really want is security that is not in the way of your customer's user journey. Security that stays in the background, that makes sure everything is defended appropriately while not really going in the face of your customer. This is how I personally would envision proper security. And this is how Akamai sees security. And with being a security company, we have seen a lot of different things happening in the past years. So in the first quarter alone, we've seen more than 1,900 different DDoS attacks that we had to mitigate. We've seen over 2 billion WAF alerts fired in the same time. Actually, an increase year over year of 70%. And mentioning the credential stuffing, we've seen over 63 billion credential abuse attacks in Q1, making it an increase of 133% from last year. With actually a new record of 1 billion requests, malicious login attempts in one single day on December 1st, 2020. Akamai is analyzing more than 300 terabytes of attack data every day, making sure that our customers are secure and also are capable of mitigating threats that come to their attention. So, this actually brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope it has been helpful for you. If you have any more questions, feel free to go to our website or approach any representative of Akamai. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of this day. Goodbye.